Gotta tell my story, living life no glory, truth in my heart, right from the start.
Okay, we are off. I want to welcome the hundreds of people that I'm sure are watching us right now. And I will introduce you to Jocelyn, who I've been friends with for several years. And there's a couple things I want to mention if we have time and Josh is willing at the end. We will take some questions from chat, but we'll get to that later. The other thing I wanted to mention, Jocelyn has said that we might want to warn people that there are a small part of her story that could involve addiction and domestic abuse. So, anybody who could be triggered by something like that, you are warned. And I will tell you, I am not seeing chat. So, if you try to talk to me, I won't know about it. But meantime, here's Jocelyn. Welcome, Jocelyn. I'm
Thank you
glad
so much
you.
for having me.
Yep. And where would you like to start?
Well, so my name's Jocelyn. I am going to tell my story about having my son at a very young age. That's kind of where my story starts. It starts a little before then. I'm going to start with actually meeting the father of my son. Um, I'm I'm 38. My son is 22 now. I was 15 when I gave birth to him. Um, But I want to go back, I think, to the day that I met his father. I was in fourth grade and we were just kids playing at a park. I had moved from my hometown in northeastern Ohio to all the way to southwestern Ohio. So I was, new friends. That was in third grade. And then in fourth grade, I was kind of hanging with these new friends, and there was this little boy there at the park, and he sent somebody over to me to tell me that he thought I was prettier than Cindy Crawford. And my response to that in fourth grade was, "Ew." I said, "Ew." I didn't want anything to do with him. I thought it was just creepy, and so, but I would see him at this park and with some of the same friends all the time, and he was always kind of there trying to get my attention. And then moving on into middle school, a good friend of mine, started talking to him, and we all sort of started hanging out together. So in sixth grade is really when I start to hang out with him as a friend. And we hang out. We're friends all the way through middle school. We all shared the same friend group, and I knew that he was interested in being my boyfriend, and I was not interested at all. But then it was, so I think I was 14, I would say. No, I was 13. I was 13. It was Christmas time. And the rest of my family, my sister, my brother, who was normal. I mean, my family's pretty small, but my sister, my brother, and my mom would normally, and me would normally spend holidays together. And my sister and brother had gone to California her with my sister's husband's family. So they were gone, and it was just my mom and I, and Damien's dad, Adam. So if I refer to Adam, that's who I'm talking about, Damien's father. Adam spent Christmas with us, with my mom and I, and we exchanged gifts and all of these things. And and by this point he had given up on being my boyfriend. He's just had given up. And but I sort of then kind of took another look at him and thought, well, he showed up for me, and he's here with my mom, and my mom loved him too. I mean, he was just part of the family at that point anyway. So we started dating. I say dating. We were 13. But yeah, so this is me and Adam at when I was 14. Um, and at that time, he was already starting to drink alcohol. He was um, he would really kind of any way he could get his hands on it, he would. And at that time, my mom had gone through a divorce with my dad, you know, years prior to this, but she was single working mother with 3 kids and no support. She really didn't have a support system at all. Um, and I was a hard child. I was a hard teenager, especially. I was extremely rebellious. I kind of did whatever I wanted. Um, and I know it was difficult for my mom to discipline and to really to handle me. But so and not to mention she was also dealing with her own mental health struggles at that time. So I think in a way to cope with all of that, she sort of shifted into a friend role more so than a parental role. So she began supplying us with alcohol and different things like that. And Adam quickly, uh, looking back now, he quickly became addicted to alcohol. He loved drinking, and he also his childhood and past is extremely sad. His mother abandoned him basically, and he was then adopted by his father's parents because his father also, you know, decided to go start a new family, and it's very sad. And so, and his mother was in and out of prison and on drugs, and I never still to this day have met her, though Damien has. Um, so, you know, I started noticing that he was having issues with alcohol, but I don't think I really understood, like at that age, I hadn't seen that at that level.
Yeah.
Um, and he was becoming increasingly more difficult to talk to and increasingly more controlling of me and my time and who I was around and that sort of thing. I remember one day, and we were having unprotected sex, which didn't start out that way, but he was able to, you know, just convince me. And I remember one time him asking me, "What would I do if I got pregnant?" And I knee jerk said I would have an abortion, is what I said to him. And it led to this really eruptive fight. I had never been like just and in my mind, he was everything that I wanted. At that time, I'm like, he's the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. You know, it kind of goes to show what little attention can do for someone who is, you know, not in a secure uh, place in their life. So I just thought he was everything. And we got into this huge eruptive fight. And he just told me, you know, I don't know why you would ever say something like that. This would be, you know, we're going to be together forever. So what does it matter? And, you know, all of these things. Um, and I remember changing my mind. And I don't think I gave it any thought to begin with. I just, it was, that's probably what I would do. You know, I wasn't thinking a lot back then. And and then he started talking about getting me pregnant, like talking about purposefully getting me pregnant. And it was I thought that, you know, it was just something that he said. I just kind of, oh, okay, you know, one day we're gonna have children. And but he was very serious, and in his mind, if I had to describe him, I would say his main coping mechanism is to um he shuts everyone out, blames everyone, and everything has to be. The word narcissist gets thrown around a lot. I don't know if I would call him a narcissist, but I know he is not empathetic at all toward others. Later would find out not even his own child. I mean, it's and he is, like I said, he had a really rough childhood. Um, but so I got pregnant. I found out I was pregnant. Actually, my mom told me that I was pregnant. My mom had noticed that I hadn't, used any of the feminine products, and I wasn't keeping track of when, my cycle was or anything. But my mom noticed, and she asked me, and I thought, there's no way, I don't know that because I don't know. I was 15 and didn't, or I was 14 at the time, and just didn't think, you know,
Yeah.
when you're that age, you really don't think things through. You think it's not going to happen to me. I'm invincible to some degree. Looking back, it's so silly. But she said, I think that you're pregnant, and she took me to get a test, and we went back home, and I was pregnant. I took the pregnancy test and I was pregnant, and I was terrified. I cried a lot. Um, my mom was very supportive. She was with me. She was, she didn't yell or scream at me or any of that. And I think also she realized that the conditions she was allowing at my house was, you know, uh, helped lead to that circumstance. So I think in a way she also felt responsible. So so I was pregnant suddenly, and of course Adam was over the moon happy about this. But he didn't have anything to offer. He didn't have any plans. He didn't nothing. And I started to realize that. I started to slowly realize that there was a person growing inside me, a full person that was going to have their own story, that was, and I'm introspective anyway, but I think at that time I was very much internally processing what was happening to me, realizing I was sort of stuck in this relationship, um, with a person who could be a total nightmare when drunk, and was getting drunk more and more. So there were times when I was pregnant that I would say my pregnancy with Damien was, I was in constant fight or flight mode. He would yell and scream at me, and those sort of things, just for nothing, for no reason. It would almost be like I would have called them episodes that I could almost see coming. Um, but yeah, he would. This picture is us when we went to Florida. I was 8 months pregnant here with Damien. We went to Florida with his family. He stayed inside the hotel room, and smoked weed in the bathtub like the entire vacation, while his family, his grandparents were, they weren't the best disciplinarians, but they had already lost control of him. And I wanted to experience Florida. So I would go out on the beach with his grandma, and we'd go looking at shells, and I would come back to a fight that I didn't stay there with him. He's very much like
Mm.
wanted me everywhere that he was. So it was pretty miserable by that point. And the drinking had become so severe that he was actually wetting the bed like every night. And and wouldn't remember it, and would, just he didn't remember a lot of things. And so when he was a sober person, he would not be able to connect with those things that he had done. So he would never really show a lot of remorse. He didn't really want to hear about it when he was sober. Um, and he would just kind of excuse it as that I was just messed up, or kind of treat me as though I was exaggerating something. So I felt like that a lot. And my mom was still drinking with him and with all my friends. And I was, you know, I went to my mom and I said, we really have to do something. I'm bringing a baby into this house and I really don't want it to be like this. I want things to change. I wanted to make improvements to the house, small improvements, new carpet, some paint. Like at that time, they were smoking cigarettes inside and that sort of thing. And it felt like not a place I wanted to bring a baby. Um, and we started making these small improvements to the house, but my mom was still having these parties, big parties every weekend with all these younger people. And it was miserable for me. I would be in my room trying to get sleep, and there was just music blaring and yelling, and um, it was a really hard, it was really difficult pregnancy. I wasn't able to really like focus on my baby. I was just focused on um, trying to survive, I guess, in that environment where I felt trapped. Um, and my mom, agreed to all of this stuff and said, we're gonna we're gonna fix everything. Everything's gonna be good, and we'll be ready. And then I think I was about 8 months pregnant. We'd come back from Florida. Um, Everyone was at my house. Everyone was drinking. My mom was particularly inebriated, and she looked at me, and I don't know still to this day if she remembers this moment. She looked at me and said, "I don't want this to change." She said, "I don't think I want anything to change." And now suddenly I was like, oh, I don't know where I'm going to go, what I'm going to do. Um, at the same time, my mom didn't want me to leave. So I was really felt like just so pulled and I didn't know what to do, but I knew that Adam's grandparents' house was at least clean and they didn't have parties and all of that sort of stuff. So it was actually the day that Damien was born, the day that Damien came home from the hospital. You may have a picture of the day that he was born. Um, he like his first, yeah. So this is the day Damien's born. And I had so many people in my delivery room. If I could go back and change that, I would. But I had Adam and his grandmother and his aunt and his stepmom and my sister and my mom and a friend. Just I didn't have any boundaries, and anybody that said we want to be in there, I just said okay. So there were so many people in there. Um, but I left the hospital that when it was time that next day, and from the hospital moved in with Adam's grandparents. So I that the first his first day home was also my first day there, living there. And there might be a picture of that too, of I think it's me on the couch
Yep.
holding him. Yeah, this is his first day home and my first day in this new environment. Not that I hadn't been there, but um, I they said, yeah, bring your stuff and move in. And so that's what I did. And they had like a tri-level house. The bottom was a finished basement. And so we moved the bed down there. We had our own bathroom. And so we were living down in this finished basement, me and Adam and little tiny Damien. And Adam just completely changed. He never wanted to be around me. He left me there by myself all the time. He would be gone sometimes overnight, and I wouldn't know where he was, wouldn't know how to get a hold of him. Um, and his grandfather didn't. He didn't talk much. He was kind of a silent type. He would do the grocery shopping. He would do things, but we didn't talk very much. But his grandmother, on the other hand, was sort of she would just come talk to me to sort of criticize me. She never offered help. She would say things to me like, when was the last time you bathed? And she was so just, she would put me down, and I was just a mess. I was crying every day. I had this new baby. I was definitely in postpartum depression, and I didn't feel like I knew where to turn or what to do. But Adam came home one day, and I mean, just he started putting me down, calling me names. It had gotten to a point that I just felt like I was going to die if I didn't get out of there. And I didn't know what was going to happen. So I called my dad. My dad was, we didn't have a super close relationship at that time. When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified to tell my dad. He just lived a few towns over. I was terrified to tell him because he had always threatened things, and he was kind of a temperamental person. And I had my sister tell him, and he didn't call me for about 3 days, and then he did finally call me, and he said, "Listen, I'm not happy about this, but I'm here for you. And if you need anything, I'm your dad. I'm here." And so I remembered that he said that, and I called him. Damien was about 4 months old at this time. I called my dad. My dad was at that time living in a one-bedroom apartment. And I said, "I have to leave. I can't be here anymore." My dad immediately came to get me, packed everything that I could into his car, took me to his apartment, gave up his one bedroom to me and Damien, and slept on an air mattress in his living room. And I felt safe for the first time in a long time. And shortly after that, he rented a house, and we all moved into it. And at that time, so I was, see, I had Damien when I was 15. So I actually had Damien during final exam week at school. So I had called into school and was panicked because I just thought, if I can get these final exams out of the way, I'll get through this year, and then I'll worry about next year. My counselor was amazing, and I called them, and they said, "Don't worry about it. We're going to take your grades from your first 2 semester exams, and we're gonna, or your yeah, and we're gonna just kind of put them together and give you an average, as though you took the test." And so that's what they did. And I decided at that point, my dad was working full time. I was breastfeeding Damien and didn't know how I was going to do a school day. So I took that year, that entire, what would have been my junior year, I took off, and was kind of going back and forth in my head about what I wanted to do. And my dad had said, "Well, gee, you could do your GED." And I just didn't want to do that. I was so very stubborn. I was like, that's just not what I want. I want to finish. I want to go back and finish high school. And so my dad found this daycare, and he took Damien to daycare every morning on his way to work. And it was out of his way, but he did it so that I could go back to school and finish. Um, and I was able to finish, um, you know, early. I had plenty of credits and was able to finish early. And um, Damien was 2 years old when I graduated, and he came to my graduation. He kept calling it my decoration. "It's your decoration, Mom." It was really the sweetest thing. But at that point, Adam and he had gotten, I say he had gotten better. He had gotten to a point where he was at least attempting to seem like he cared. And all I kept thinking at that age was, I can't have my child without both parents. It's like, oh, that's the worst thing. The worst thing would be to have Damien without both parents. Yeah, here's Damien at about 2 and 3. Sadly, I don't have a lot of pictures from this time. It was really before social media was a thing that was saving pictures. There was no cloud or anything. I had a digital camera that I had hundreds of pictures on of his toddler years that was stolen from me.
Hmm.
So unfortunately, I don't have a lot of pictures of him during this time. But and this was also a hard time for both of us. I moved in with my dad. I was, you know, just making it and going to high school, and Adam was not leaving me alone. He was, and I was, you know, I was not comfortable with him having Damien by himself, because I knew he had a problem with alcohol. Um, and so I would attempt to spend time with him, and it was never about Damien. It was always about me. It was always about me and him. And I tried this off and on for several years. And there were incidents that were uh, traumatizing and scary. You know, I can think of one in particular. Damien was about 2, and it was Christmas time, and I had been a part. I wanted to bring this up as well as a side note. There was a program called Grads that I was in through high school, and it was for pregnant and parenting teens. An amazing program, and I don't know where I would be without them. The instructor of the program, her name was Shelley, and yeah, here's a picnic of they would throw picnics and uh, you know, field trips. We would go to museums. They helped me get furniture. They helped me get a side job painting. You know, they were really incredible. They helped me file any kind of paperwork that I was needing to do, or they helped me learn um, how to navigate those adult parts of living. And they were just extremely supportive and constantly giving me resources on positive parenting and things that I hadn't seen or known, but desperately like craved for my child. So they were throwing a Christmas party at the high school, and all of the moms and dads and kids were invited, and Adam had been trying to um, spend time with us, and I finally decided. I said, you know, you can come to this Christmas party. It felt safe to me. It was in a public place. And I said, you can come to this Christmas party with us. And he said, okay. And he, you know, I'm going to prove everything's great and I'm going to do better. And so we went to this Christmas party. And the entire Christmas party, he was extremely antisocial. He never would talk to any other person. He, it was quite uncomfortable. Um, and then his grandfather picked us up, and I said I wanted to go home. I wanted him to take me and Damien home. And he just kind of bullied his grandfather into bringing us back to his house. And rather than fight it, I knew at that point I was trapped, and I said, okay, we'll come over. We'll come over for a little bit, but we came over and we were kind of sitting in his room, and his favorite thing to do would be to turn his music up as loud as he could and subject us to whatever music he wanted us to hear, me and my toddler. And I'm like, you know, I would try to talk to him, and I noticed he was becoming increasingly more belligerent. I didn't see him drinking anything, and I still to this day don't know what he was on or what he had done, but he was definitely inebriated, something, pills or something. And I started, I wanted to leave, and I said, we're going to go, you know, and at this time we weren't together. You know, I said, we're going to leave. And he threw this huge uh, fit, I guess I would say. He screamed at everyone in the house, including both of his grandparents, was screaming at me, picked up a bird cage with a live bird in it and threw it across the room at me. And as I was shielding Damien, and just went crazy, sort of off the handle because I wanted to leave. And his grandfather finally he got in the truck, and I followed him with Damien to get in. and he was just terrorizing us the whole time. And he had stolen money out of my wallet and then thrown it at me, and it had his blood all over. Because I mean, when I say he was throwing chairs, he was hurting himself more than anyone, but he was dangerous. Absolutely, like I was terrified. And Damien was at 2 years old, had no idea what was happening, but was scared. So we left. I decided that that was it. I was never going to try to mend that relationship with him, even as a co-parent. I just thought this can't work. Um, and he would call me. I mean, just all day and night, all day. He would call me names, and then he would go back to saying he loved me and he wanted his family back, and then he would tell me he was going to kill himself. And it was torture. It was torture. And I did decide to take him to court, um, because I just didn't. There, I knew that I couldn't take Damien out of his life completely. There wasn't any way that was going to happen. Damien actually loved him, and it's his dad. And so I decided that I would go to court and we would get visitation mapped out. And so that's what we did. Um, they, the one thing he was very, very against from the beginning was ever having to pay child support, of course. And that was something that I said I'm not worried about it. Like, you know, they do, though, however, when you're a young mother and you're on assistance from the government with insurance and whatever, they do make you go for child support, at least in the state of Ohio. So I got a letter saying that he was going to lose his benefits unless I did this. So I had to call, you know, Adam and explain to him what was happening. And of course, he flew off the handle and whatever. And I said, well, you know, it's just, I don't care about your money. He didn't have any money anyway. I don't care about your money, but my kid has to have insurance and he has to have these things. So we went to court. They ordered that he pay $169 a month, which he was furious about. And never really ever paid any anyway. But he actually did try to take me back to court and get it lowered. And they basically laughed in his face, which is what I told him would happen. I said, listen, they're not going to lower this. I'm like, it's pretty much the minimum. They're not going to lower this. But he did take me back to court anyway, which made him have to pay court costs. And still, they said, why can't you pay this? And he said, I don't have enough hours at work. And they said, why don't you have enough hours at work? And why don't you have a different job? And why don't you know? They just they weren't listening to his bullshit. And so he was still ordered to pay that. And for a while, he had decided to go to AA. And I told him I would go to those meetings with him. Once again, I'm back, but I thought if this is really it and he's really getting help, I do want him to have some support person there. And so I went to AA with him, and you know, it's one of those things, like it would work for maybe a day or two, and then he would just be off and running and drunk again and lying about it, and not only drinking but doing just about any other drug that was put in front of him. Just really chaotic, just very, very chaotic. So one of these such times that he was sober, Damien was visiting with him, and he would take, Damien was probably about 7, I think, yeah, 6 or 7. He would go fishing with his dad. I think we have a picture of him fishing. Yeah, it was right about this age. Yeah, he would go fishing with his dad a lot. His dad really liked to fish. His uncles on his dad's side, they were very much into fishing, and Damien loved it. And Damien's actually still very...
Josh, can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
If you want to take a minute at any time, you know, to catch your breath or anything.
Yeah, I'm probably going off on so many branches too.
No, no, no. I noticed you taking some deep breaths and stuff, and I didn't know if you needed to gather yourself. If you're good, that's fine. But I just wanted to
Okay,
tell you if you needed a pause at any point. It's cool.
thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. So this was a day that Damien went fishing with his dad, and I don't know, I'm gonna describe an incident that happened. I don't know if this is the same day, but it's definitely around the same time. And they'd gone fishing, um, and Damien, Adam actually had brought some Jack Daniels or something, some kind of liquor, hard liquor, in his tackle box. At this age, Damien had already noticed the drinking and had already asked that it not happen when he was there. And Adam would agree. And oh, am I still there? Okay.
Yeah.
Adam would agree for a while and make promises to Damien. This was when that sort of thing would start happening. He would start making promises to Damien and breaking them. But they started to hide it from me because I would put a stop to it and I would cut communication, and so they started hiding things from me. He started getting Damien to hide things from me. So Damien was protecting his dad. And so I was really in the dark. I was being told that he was sober, that he had been, going to meetings and been in recovery, and I had seen some of that. So I and at this time he was kind of leaving me alone for a while. Um, and I didn't know any of this actually until years later, but he was getting really drunk and passing out and blacking out and whatever while my son was there. And he did so on one such occasion when they went fishing, and he left my son there by himself. Basically, he was there, but he was passed out drunk. And my son had to find a phone to call his grandmother to come get him. Of course, his grandmother, also a total enabler, would buy him whatever he wanted, would give him money for whatever he wanted. Um, she also kept things from me. So, there would be times where, so I decided at one point, because Damien told me something that bothered me. He, I knew there wasn't, that the full truth wasn't being told to me. So I actually decided, this was probably when Damien was about 10. I got a phone call so he was ordered. Yeah, it's about this age. Uh, the visitation order said that Damien could be there every Wednesday evening and every other weekend. Of course, this was really never adhered to, because I was always very flexible and lenient, and they were always deciding when was a good time, and sometimes not showing up, and sometimes wanting him out of the blue, and I kind of went along with this as much as possible, mostly to avoid a fight. To avoid a
Mhm.
fight. And I would ask Damien if he wanted to go, and he would say he wanted to go. So one night when he was at his dad was actually seeing this woman, Lindsay, at the time. And she had two little girls, and they had gotten an apartment, which wasn't very far um, from the grandparents' house. It was right down the street. And I got a phone call about 3 o'clock in the morning from Lindsay saying that Adam had just beaten her, and during this time Damien was with Adam. That he had beaten her and held her hands behind her back and had instructed Damien to hit her, um, which he did. And then they took off, and she said they're on the run. They're somewhere out on the street. I don't know where they are. And um, I've never in my life before or since felt that feeling of just complete and total helplessness, uh, not knowing where my child was, knowing that he was with a man that was capable of really awful, dangerous things and was not in his right mind. And so, I called 911. I called, I called his grandmother. His grandmother was pretending not to know where he was while hiding him, which I found out later. Well, the police found out she was hiding him. Um, it was one of the scariest nights of my life. And so the very next day, once I got Damien home, I went to file a protection order for Damien against his father. And I just explained to Damien that, because then all of this other stuff started coming out, that these things had happened. I asked him about him and Lindsay and what their relationship was like, and they were fighting all the time in front of him, and both on drugs. And so I went to court and filed a protection order, and that put a pause on the visitation order. I was still, let's see, at this age, I mean, I didn't have a lot of money. I couldn't afford a lawyer. So I decided, someone had told me about legal aid. So I contacted legal aid, and basically what legal aid does or did at that time was they don't really help you with a lawyer. They teach you how to file your own paperwork. So I sat in on a class and learned how to file paperwork. For what I wanted was for Damien to have supervised visits with his dad. And that's what Damien wanted. Damien wanted to see his dad, but he wanted to feel safe. And Adam had a way of making Damien feel responsible for his well-being. And he did that with me as well. And he did the same thing to Damien. He would tell him things like, I need you if I'm going to get sober. I need you. You're all I have. And then just repeatedly break promises. It was extremely sad and still is sad. But a child, and there was no point ever where I could say to Damien, no, your dad is just a piece of shit, leave him alone. Like, I couldn't say that. He loved his dad. And had I said bad things about him, I think it would have um, probably caused Damien even more to put up that wall between us to try to protect his dad. I would just say things to Damien like, that's not fair to you. That's not fair to you. And I want you to see your dad too, but this isn't fair. So I started taking Damien to counseling, and they did immediately diagnose him with PTSD. Because there were repeated incidents revealed in counseling that he had witnessed or undergone while he was at his dad's. Um, so let's see, where am I? I went and I filed paperwork to try and get supervised visitation. I wanted, and Damien had agreed. And so I went to court. I brought with me a victims' rights advocate. I didn't have a lawyer. I brought a victims' rights advocate. I brought 6 different police reports that I had gotten pulled from from incidents that had happened while Damien was there. Went in front of the judge, and it was awful. She sided with him. She said, basically, she said, who do you think supervises? And I said, well, I know that there's a program in the city that will supervise. She said, so you want your son to sit across the table from his dad for a few hours a week? And I said, that's better than him being in danger or being subjected to these things. And when I presented the police reports, she wouldn't look at them because of shoddy police reporting, my son's name was never mentioned in them,
No.
even though he was present. So she said it was hearsay and wouldn't look at them or consider them at all. She did ask me, what about his grandparents? Can his grandparents be the supervisors? And I said, they've been there this entire time and it hasn't changed anything. It's not better. It's, you know, she said, well, I have 30 days to make my decision. You'll get my decision in the mail. And here's Damien at 5. Yeah, we had moved back to our hometown here. I skipped over a whole
Yeah.
area of time, but so
the judge was siding with him.
basically she said, I have 30 days to make my decision. And when I got the decision in the mail, she had named his grandparents supervisors. So she had granted me supervised visitation, but not really. It was heartbreaking. And she basically told me if I kept him from him, that she would hold me in contempt of court. And yeah, it wasn't until Damien was about 12. He was in, I think he was in middle school, when he did finally decide he didn't want to see his dad anymore. Because after court with the supervised, visitation and everything, they dropped the protection order. They, didn't see any reason to uphold it. And they dropped it and he started going for visits again. And when he was about 12 years old, 11, 12 years old, I got another phone call from him, and it was probably 8 o'clock at night. It wasn't very late. It was dark, but it wasn't very late. And I was actually out at a friend's house, and he called me, and all I could hear was screaming and yelling and him crying, and I couldn't make sense of what he was saying. And I was immediately in my car and calling 911, and the dispatcher told me, ma'am, there's already officers on the scene. And it's just one of those things, like, I really still feel the courts failed us. But it was another incident of him, abusing. He abused his grandmother. He abused his girlfriend. Damien will still maintain to this day that he never hit him. So I have no reason to believe that he did, but he put him through mental anguish every time he was there. And then guilt for, if he wanted to leave, just exactly the same that he did to me when we were younger. I feel that the alcohol really stunted him, and he's still very much, he's almost 40 years old, and he's still he cannot work. He's not a productive member of society in any sense. He can barely make eye contact with people. He's a very disturbed and yeah, it's one of those things where you hope there's help and healing for people, but at some point you sort of lose hope for that, you know. So Damien decided on his own not to see him. But that changes all the time. Still to this day, he'll all through high school, Damien's dad would call him throughout the day over and over and over. Talk to me. And Dad, I'm at school. I'm at school. He had what doesn't live in reality, and everything must revolve around him. And if you don't answer his phone call, he's gonna kill you, or he's gonna kill himself. Or there was a time when Damien was about 4, and I was in a relationship, and I was living with my boyfriend at the time. And or Adam and his friend had called and called and called, and they were just torturing us for days. And this is Damien in kindergarten. this about around the time that this took place. Adam called and said he was going to break into my house and tie up my boyfriend and rape me in front of him and take Damien away. And I was never going to see him again. He did things like this kind of frequently, actually, but this time it was him and his friend. And his friend was a big, kind of scary guy, and they were threatening these things. And I saved this message and I called the police, and the police came and did nothing and treated me, asked me all kinds of questions. And I feel that I was never supported by the justice system in any way throughout this, and neither was Damien. They failed us a lot. But so I really never felt like I knew where to turn or what to do. But uh, Damien became the age where he could start making those decisions for himself. When he was 12 and 13, he was deciding not to see his dad, and sometimes that would lead to, you know, constant phone calls and messages and things like that. And it's really kind of been ever since, just sort of Damien decides he'll want to mend fences with him. At when Damien was 19, I think I have a picture of him and his dad when he's 19.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. You know what I'm thinking?
what you
You know
think?
how I said we wanted to keep it to about an hour?
Yeah,
And I feel like we've just sort of reached the first half of your story.
maybe. I mean, that may
Um,
be.
you know,
Yeah,
it's sort of, and I'm wondering maybe if we break here, and if you want to, we'll see if anybody in chat has any questions about
yeah.
this, just up to this part. And then we'll discuss coming back and talking about what happened from this point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
All right.
oh, here we can bring this up though. This is that picture you were talking about, I think.
Yeah. Yep. This is a visit with his dad um, that did not go well,
Hmm.
we'll say.
Yeah,
But
well, I think this is a okay.
yeah, this is a
I'm not
good
sure how you
visit.
can. I'm not. I'm not. I don't know if you can see these. Pat's cat says, "Jocelyn, you're an amazing person. Thank you so much."
Oh, thank you. Thank you so
And
much.
I agree.
Thank you.
GMK had said earlier, Damien is adorable. I know
Yes.
he. They said that when you were showing like baby picture, I didn't mention it at the time though.
He's always been blue eyes, long lashes.
Can I?
Adorable.
Can I? Can I just say? Well, oh, there's one. Nikki wants to know. Did you know if the schools in the area support pregnant teens or parenting teens? Do you know still? Do you? Yeah, I think she
No,
wants to know now.
right. It's been so that is something that I wanted to mention, that that grads program has since been defunded, and that is heartbreaking to me because like I said, they were so incredibly helpful to me. No, they don't do it anymore.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
I wanted to say personally, and you know, this part of it, I always admired the fact that you finished high school. You know,
Thank you.
instead of just kind of giving up, you decide to raise your son, and you also decided that you wanted better for him than you
Yeah.
saw for yourself. And next time we'll talk about you know, what you've done since. And GMK wants to know what's your relationship with Damien like now.
So Damien and I are very close. He's 22. We've been through a lot. He was probably a lot like me in ways that he became extremely rebellious, and our relationship was challenging in his later teen years. But he uh, he and I are very close now. So
Ariel, can you, while we go to the next question, just for me, can you bring up that one that's my favorite picture, the two of them leaning against the tree? Biscuits wants to know if you and Damien have had therapy.
So therapy for Damien, yes. Damien's actually in therapy again now. He had decided when he was about 16 that he didn't want to do therapy. Yeah, there's Muck's favorite picture. I like that one too. I love that whole photo shoot that we did together was amazing.
Pat says, for as little support you had as a child, you are incredibly mature.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel like when I really, really needed the support, there was always somebody who came through. Like my grad's class was amazing. My dad showing up, and my mom. I really haven't given her enough credit, and that's also another part of the story. But she came around and was supportive. Therapy, Damien, like I said, Damien's in therapy now. He did for a long time quit therapy. He's on his own receiving therapy now. Me, I never have. Something I would love to do. I've used, the apps and things like that, but unfortunately, I'm a small business owner with no health insurance, so therapy
Yeah.
isn't necessarily within reach for me. But
Yeah, I think this is a good place to break.
okay,
I'll
yeah.
thank you for part one. I
Thank you so
will
much.
thank the people who came in to watch.
Yes,
And
thank you.
I saw Pat just said thank you, Joss. I saw somebody said they're already looking forward to part two. Yeah,
Awesome.
and when we go off the air, we can talk backstage about setting up something for next time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody who is watching. I appreciate you and your comments and questions. Look
And by the
forward to
way, I
next
also
time.
want to thank my backstage team, the
Yes.
rest of the FMAC crew.
Yeah, I was all over the place with my story, so them
Oh,
trying to
I I thought it went well. I thought you
they did a
were
great
nice
job.
and okay. So, folks, we'll let you know when she's going to be back. And thanks
Thank
for
you so
being
much.
here.
Thank you.